is the only community-driven rural health research institute in Canada. Our mission is to improve the health and quality of life of rural residents through research, education, and communication. Gateway launched this virtual lecture series in February of this year, with social isolation being at the top of mind as COVID-19 restrictions were tightening. It seemed like an ideal time to launch this initiative. Through this lecture series, we hope to contribute to rural health knowledge and innovation while virtually connecting communities and helping to reduce social isolation. For those of you with perfect attendance this semester, September through December, we'll be sending you a diploma recognizing your commitment to and involvement with this educational series. Today's discussion leader is Scott Brown. Scott is a PhD candidate and sessional instructor at the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development at the University of Guelph. And we're pleased to say he's also a Gateway Research Associate. Scott's studies focus on organizational development, how organizations emerge, their growth, and their impact on communities. He's going to lead us through an interactive Gateway timeline, a visual representation of the development of our not-for-profit organization. He'll introduce us to how Gateway came to be almost 13 years ago and outline important milestones on our journey to today. Thank you, Scott, for your continued effort and commitment to Gateway. Joining Scott today are key contributors to Gateway's success. The panelists include Gwen Devereaux, Gateway President. Dr. Lauzon is a professor at the University of Guelph's School of Environmental Design and Rural Development. Al is also Gateway's Chair of Rural Change and Development. And Paul Nichol is the General Manager of Community Futures Huron and a longtime supporter of Gateway. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, and I'll turn it over to you now, Scott.
Thanks for the intro, Nancy. That was great, and thank you to Gateway as well for hosting me. I've been looking forward to giving this presentation and looking forward to the panel discussion afterwards as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so historically speaking, in regards to the Gateway lecture series, the presenters so far have really focused each on a particular health-related issue. And the presenters, the range has been sort of, presenters have talked about sort of traditional healthcare topics, ranging from the clinical, medical, that sort of area on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there's been presenters talking about, let's say, the social determinants of health side of things. For me, I'd like to take things in a slightly different direction. I'm from outside of healthcare, and I'm interested in organizational development, as Nancy was talking about. So today, I want to actually talk to you about the Gateway itself. And as Nancy said, I'm going to be showing you some interactive slides that I've created that showcase Gateway's progress across time. But that's my primary objective today. But what I'd also like to do is sort of place that discussion against a broader backdrop of thinking about organizational development, organizational emergence, the importance of recognizing, nonlinear and organic organizational growth, the importance of building a common organizational memory from which organizations can draw, and the importance of visualizing progress across time. I think these topics have great utility for organizations. So if you have an interest in Gateway, this presentation is for you. But if you're also interested in organizational development in general, I hope that this presentation will have interest for you. So let me just get started here. So yeah, again, welcome to Gateway Lecture Series number 8, the Interactive Gateway Timeline, Mapping Success in Rural Health. So let me just begin by talking to you about how all of this began. In 2018, Dr. Lauzon, who's on the panel, as well as Dr. Heather Mayer, who at the time were both newly appointed Gateway Research Chairs. The three of us, we were based on our interests and also based on the fact that we were new to the organization, we did not have an intimate familiarity with the organization. We thought a great initial research project would be to look at the organization itself. So we tried to cover 6 different facets, 6 different areas, and those were the context for Gateway's overall development, Gateway's various developmental ingredients, various learning events across time, Gateway's goals and plans and how those have evolved, various outcomes, impacts, and we also wanted to explore a little bit the future of Gateway. So these were the areas that we outlined that we wanted to explore. And so we did just that, and we talked to Gateway board members, we talked to Gateway advisors and research chairs, people who had been involved with the organization across time. We looked at various Gateway documents, planning documents. We looked at everything we could get our hands on. And then we presented at the CERH conference in 2018. We talked about these various areas. And another thing that I presented in 2018 at the CERH conference were early versions of the slides that I'm going to share with you today. Like I said, this was initially a sense-making research project really for us, just to make sense of what Gateway was all about. And so one thing that I started to do was, we had all of this information pertaining to Gateway, binders and binders. And as a newcomer, I thought it would be helpful for me to start plotting this information on a timeline. And so I started building a timeline just using PowerPoint and creating clickable content. You could sort of click through and learn. And again, I just sort of did this for me, but then the slides, I liked the way that they looked, and I thought, well, I'll present them at the CERH conference. And so I presented an early version of these slides at the CERH conference. But when we got home, I thought, oh, there's still a lot more I can add. So for a whole other year, I kept adding more information. And then eventually I showed these slides to the Gateway board members and research chairs and the other students at the end of 2019. And since then I've updated it to include 2020, 2019, or 2020. And yeah, just to add that extra year of content. And so I'll be showing you those slides in just a minute. And again, so where do we get our information? From the Gateway website. Gateway's got a great comprehensive website. We took information from their newsletters across time, their strategic planning documents, business plans, marketing and communication strategies, various Gateway presentations and literature. And like I said, we interviewed all sorts of Gateway personnel to create these slides. So the first thing I'll say is this presentation, this format of presenting the slides is not the intended format. Really, I created these slides so that an individual could sit down at their own computer and open up this presentation and click through it really at their own pace to let their interests guide where they want to click and what sort of information they want to look at. So it will be interactive for me today, but it won't be interactive for you. You'll sort of experience the presentation through my activity with it. So just to reiterate, this is not the intended format. It's really created for board members or anyone really to sit through it and guide themselves through it. So here's just a little tutorial that I created just to get things started. But anyway, I'll go ahead and skip this. A little bit of a table of contents. Okay, so here's the first slide that I would like to share with you. Now, I'm wondering if there are certain parts that I can't click because of the Zoom menu, but I think that's okay. Oh, there, it went away. Okay, so this slide, before I talk about the content of the slide, I want to talk about the formatting. So each slide looks much like this. It's a timeline going from 2008 to the present. And then each slide as well has a title at the top, and you're able to click it and find out what the slide is all about. So each slide that we're looking at today is going to basically have that same format. So in terms of the content of the slide, the goals and strategies that Gateway has adopted across time. Now, a quick way to learn about Gateway's goals and strategies is really to look at their mission and their vision. So I'll just read here real quick. Gateway's mission in 2019 anyway. Gateway's Center of Excellence in Rural Health aims to improve the health and quality of life of rural residents through research, education, and communication. Their vision, Gateway's vision, is to build a center of excellence dedicated to advancing rural health teaching and community-based research across the Huron-Perth Bruce Grey region. So these are, it's good to know Gateway's vision and mission, but these are very low resolution versions of what Gateway is trying to do and how they're going to accomplish it. And if you want a higher resolution view of what Gateway is all about, what you really want to look at is their various strategic plans and their business plans and their communications documents, which have a lot more information. And so that's what I wanted to outline for this slide. So what I've done is I've looked in all the binders that Gwen gave me. She gave me a giant stack of papers, and inside there were all sorts of strategic plans and business plans, et cetera. Some of these are uploaded on the website, some of them are not. But my intent was to lay these out so that someone could open this slide and then click through the various documents. So they're all here in one place and very accessible. So if you were interested in learning about Gateway's initial proposal from 2008, you would be able to click through and then sort of learn about how Gateway was thinking at that time and how they were thinking about the strategies that they were adopting to accomplish their goals. Again, I apologize. I'm going to be clicking through a lot of stuff very quickly. So I apologize if you're in the middle of reading something and then all of a sudden it disappears. It's not really about having you read each individual piece. I'm just trying to show you the variety and the amount of information that these slides are able to hold. So again, I apologize if you're reading something and I click away from it. But again, so the various business plans that Gateway has had, you're able to sit down and sort of see these, a condensed version of these very quickly. And so if you sit down and you know absolutely nothing about Gateway, spending a little bit of time on this slide can show you an enormous amount of information. You can learn a lot about Gateway just sitting here and clicking through. And then you get to see sort of how Gateway has evolved over time, right? The strategic plan from 2013 is certainly not the same one from 2011. And there's sort of a progression of ideas. And this is all captured within one slide with all sorts of information. Some of their strategic planning sessions and documents were also accompanied by the SWOT exercises. So that would be strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so when those were included in the strategic planning sessions, I've just included a little icon there, and then you can go through and see what those discussions produced. So again, just to reiterate, it's all about having all this information in one place at one time. And then more recently, Gateway had a strategic planning session just on Friday. So that report is not here yet, but when that's complete, I'm sure I'll be able to upload it onto this slide. So that was on Friday at the Ben Miller in Goderich, and here's a couple pictures. I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, and maybe Gwen will be able to talk a little bit about what happened there in the panel discussion afterwards. So there we have it. There's that slide and all sorts of information condensed into one place, highly accessible. You can learn a ton about Gateway just looking at this slide here. So let me go on to the next one. Okay, so this slide is meant to showcase Gateway's various outputs. Now, not all of their outputs are on this slide, of course, but I'm mainly talking about their research projects and their various community programming. So I'm just going to click here up for some information, and I can read directly from this slide here. So up at the top here, I'm focusing on Gateway research projects that have more traditional research outputs like presentations and publications and reports. So Gateway research projects. Gateway engages in and is a portal for rural health research. Gateway research chairs, research associates, and students engage in a variety of inquiries related to rural health, clinical or otherwise. These endeavors have a variety of outputs, presentations, posters, reports, publications, and other forms of knowledge transfer. For example, Dr. Chang, Gateway's chair of rural pharmacy, and her University of Waterloo pharmacy students have turned much of their attention towards rural considerations and have engaged in a variety of rural research projects. Another good example of a research project that's currently ongoing is the Food Insecurity and Rural Seniors Project. So there's some information about that project right there. Perhaps Al can talk to us a little bit about that project later on. Again, the point isn't to show you about each project, each research project that Gateway has been involved with, but just to show you that just sort of the variety and the various projects that they've been involved with over time. And just to clarify, some of these names are longer than others. This isn't meant to show the duration of a project. For the most part, a project is associated with, a project sort of begins where the title begins, if that makes sense. So it's not really meant to demonstrate duration. And then community programming towards the bottom. So Gateway isn't just involved with research, but they're also increasingly moving towards community programming. So let me just click up at the top here again. Hard to get that menu to go away at the top. Sorry about that. Well, I can't click the top again right now, but that's okay. So Grand Sparks is a great example of community programming that Gateway has put on. So the Grand Sparks program is a program for rural grandparents and their grandchildren. It's an outdoor exercise program, and that's something that Gateway has offered the community directly, and they can participate in that directly. That's an iterative program that ran for 4 years, and then I think it's going to be offered in 2022 as well. The Lonely No More is another great example of a community program that Gateway has put on. It's probably the one that's got the most media attention. It's all about combating social isolation for rural seniors, and it's completely volunteer run. So volunteers receive training about how to facilitate these telecommunication sessions, and then they're able to facilitate that for the benefit of rural seniors. This slide extends to 2022, just to make room for myself to add more stuff. Currently, there are, I think, 11 or 18 projects on the go. I've only got 11 outlined here. I know that expanding into 2022, the Be Well, Work Well project is a massive project that Gateway is going to undertake. And perhaps Gwen can talk to us about that later. And also the Great Local Food project is a new project that's on the go. So again, just to reiterate, it's not all about showing you each project, but again, someone can sit down with this slide and then all at once click through and see the various projects that Gateway has been involved with. For example, the lecture series so far, I guess my lecture would be right here, number 8. So again, lots of variety. Oops. And so there's that. Sorry. This next slide is meant to showcase Gateway's research arm. And the academic institutions, the chairs of rural research, and the various health partners and clinical sites that make up that research arm. Now, Gateway doesn't use the term research arm. That's more of a term that I like to use. But Gwen will tell you that Gateway was really meant to be the research arm for the small rural hospitals in Gateway's target area. Now, in a lot of urban hospitals, there's a tremendous research effort and coordination. And so, and that isn't to say that the small rural hospitals don't do research in Gateway's target area, but the point, the aim of Gateway was really to build that research apparatus and build that up to a critical mass where it could meet the demands of, well, it's important to have local research. And also, when there's research going on in rural, it's attractive for human resources and health. So, you know, doctors who want to move to rural will be more interested if they can do research up in rural areas. So this research arm is really all about creating that research activity. So up here at the top, you can see Gateway's academic partners across time. The University of Guelph, the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development. For a time, Gateway had a partnership with Georgian College. Gateway has a very strong partnership with the University of Waterloo, the School of Pharmacy. Heather Mayer is from the University of Waterloo as well, but she's not from the School of Pharmacy. and then also Western University. So you're really sort of able to click here and learn about how Gateway formed partnerships with these various institutions. Again, I'm not really giving you time to read these, but just to sort of show you what information that the slides hold. In the middle here, we have the chairs of rural research. Now, at the beginning of Gateway's duration, I guess, most of the projects were the responsibility of the scientific director for choosing and organizing research projects that fell to the scientific director. Over time, Gateway moved towards what they are calling the research chair model, which is basically the responsibilities of the scientific director have become refracted into sort of a multidisciplinary team of rural chairs of research. And you can see, even just from looking at the names of the chairs, that it's really moved away from medical and clinical focus to include also, like I said earlier, the social determinants of health. So you can see at the beginning, the chair of rural pharmacy, Dr. Chang, she was the first chair at Gateway, chair of rural mental health, chair of rural pain medicine. You can see that sort of clinical medical focus. And then as time goes on, you can see that Gateway is adding the chair of rural economic development, chair of rural change and development, chair of rural community development and well-being. So you can see how the research areas for Gateway has really become more eclectic across time. And so again, the idea here is that you can click through and learn a bit about each research chair. So I'll just, for example, Al Lauzon, who is here as well, and who also did a Gateway lecture series. He's the chair of rural change and development. You can read a little bit about him there. Dr. Peel, who also had a Gateway lecture series. She's the chair of rural senior care. And so again, you can learn a little bit about these eclectic interests of Gateway's research chairs. And then the most recent additions to the research team are the Gateway chair of rural resiliency and the chair of rural cardiac rehabilitation. So I think there's 13 research chairs now. I think that's correct. Then here at the bottom, we've got Gateway's health partners and clinical sites. So a lot of the research that Gateway is involved with takes place at the level of care and sometimes at the level of actually, meeting with patients, et cetera. And so students and Gateway researchers need access to these clinical sites. Indeed, some of the researchers work at these health institutions and sites. And again, this is not a complete list of their health partners. These are sort of the four main partners that I could talk about. To get a more clear view or a more full view of all of their partners, I can just click this map here that I've created. So this map shows the various hospitals and the family health teams that have more or less been involved with Gateway projects over time, some more than others, but for the most part, these are the main locations. I should have also included St. Joseph's Hospital in London. And not pictured here are the various pharmacies that have been facilitated of Gateway projects. And for the most part, it's in this particular region, but that's complicated by I guess it's not a new relationship anymore, it's been a few years, with the Winchester District Memorial Hospital near Ottawa. So Gateway has an interest in its own rural location, its own rural geography, but it's also interested in rural health in general. And so that partnership with the hospital near Ottawa is really a demonstrative of that. Now, there's another thing I want to show just real quick, and I apologize for the crude overlay here, but you can see here the major referral centers in Southwest Lynn. Here's London, and here's Stratford area, and up here is an Owen Sound Hospital. And then there's this sort of general area in here, which is sort of away and without those major referral centers. And if you look at the locations where Gateway has mostly been active, again, this isn't every place they've been and that they practice, but here's that general area here, and then it just sort of corresponds more or less with this general area that is without the major referral centers. this isn't a significant finding or anything, but it's sort of affirming that Gateway really has built that network in that specific sort of rural area that is away from those larger, I guess you could call them urban centers, I suppose. So anyway, let me go back here. So yeah, what do you get when you put that all together? That's basically Gateway's research arm. They're trying to assemble that research arm out of many ingredients, and then so the health partners, the research directors, and the chairs of rural research and academic partners, put them all together, and what you have is basically a portal for rural research and students and other researchers who want to do research in rural. Putting all of these aspects together, you've built that portal and you've built that gateway into rural for meaningful rural research. So this slide is really meant to capture that research arm across time. Okay, let me see here. Okay, this slide showcases Gateway's students across time. I've included HealthKick here. HealthKick was a precursor to Gateway, very student-oriented, and you can click through and learn a little bit about those students who were involved with the HealthKick program. I don't want to talk too much about HealthKick just because of time here, but I wanted to include it in the student slide just because there were just so many students involved with HealthKick. And these are student testimonials. They're not tied to these dates in particular. They're just, they're not associated with these particular times. But over here in the Gateway category, these students are associated with a particular time that they're located on the timeline. And it doesn't look organized, but it is somewhat organized. It's an organized mess here. Up at the top, we've got high school and co-op students. In this general area here, there are summer students that have come to Gateway through various summer student programs. For the most part, these are students that have arrived at Gateway through the academic partners. So mostly students who are going to the University of Waterloo, the University of Guelph, University of Western Ontario, et cetera. And then towards the bottom, there's students that have gained a practicum component. So for example, registered nurses who are completing a practicum component or something like that through Gateway are towards the bottom. So I don't want to, I won't click through these, but again, the idea of this slide is that you can see just how many students Gateway has had over the years. I'm sure there are many that I've missed. I know that Gateway has worked with over 100 students. I think there's probably only about 70 or 75 here. So I know I'm missing some. But again, this slide really gives you an idea of just the scope of Gateway's reach and how many students have had the opportunity to do rural research through the Gateway research portal, I suppose. So I won't spend too much time on that. This slide here, and I'm just going to go through it quick because we're sort of running short on time, is an eclectic slide talking about various fundraising events, select knowledge mobilization and connection events, and select academic and student presentations. Now, Gateway doesn't just do research, they're involved in all kinds of things. And one thing that they've been involved with for 5 years in a row was the Hometown Heroes fundraising. They put an incredible amount of effort and energy to these fundraising activities, and were able to raise all sorts of funds for their various rural research projects and community programmings. And then this slide is really a work in progress. I would really have to decide whether or not to keep this section here. R2R is not a Gateway event, but they've been involved with the R2R conferences that the CCRC has put on, and there should be an R2R symbol there for 2020 as well. I don't know the utility of this bottom part here, select academic and student presentations. Just because there's been so many presentations over the years, I don't know if it's useful to put that on the slide. You can see here just how many presentations associated with Gateway there have been. So I'm not sure if that's the best idea for a slide, and so I might make some changes there. Sorry, some of the slides take a minute to load. Whoops. My apologies. There's just so much information on each slide. It takes a while for my computer. Okay, so if you wanted to, you could click through here and find out about these various fundraising activities. Some more recent fundraising activities are here, the golf tournaments, etc. Anyway, I'll move on to the next slide here. I think the most important part on this slide would be the various awards that Gateway has received over time. Gateway in the news. Now, Gateway has been in the news and in the media hundreds of times. I'm not sure if that's a good, I'm not sure if this is a good use of the space on the slide. And then also select Gateway publications from Gateway's research chairs. So that's sort of an eclectic slide that needs a bit of work, but again, shows you a lot of information about Gateway. Here is a slide that I haven't updated to 2021, but it's really supposed to be a collection of all the previous slides. So you see the various research chairs here. All the stars are meant to represent various students that Gateway has had over the years. This little transformational period here is meant to convey that sort of transformational period in Gateway's history where they had to change some of their strategies. So I would say this is more transformational change, and then emergent change over here and transformational change here. There's a story that can be told there through this slide. I won't go into it now, but again, I really like this slide as an opportunity to maybe talk about the whole Gateway story, and to have all that information in one place. You can see here that Gateway has had their offices in various locations, and so there's that story there. Again, the idea is that you can click through all these things and learn lots and lots and lots about Gateway. I won't concentrate on that slide too much. Okay, so now let's jump off into the discussion. But first, I just have a few other things to say. So it's not really profound stuff that I've just presented, but I think it is pragmatic. None of this has really been an analytical exercise. It's really been an exercise in organization. So sorting through content, compiling lists of content, curating content, and sort of giving it a visual aesthetic quality. So it's really just organizing information and making it accessible. And I'm using recycled material, right? A lot of the blurbs that were in those clickable, a lot of the information that you saw wasn't written by me. It was written by Gateway personnel, because Gateway has over time done a very good job of writing things down. If you have an organization that's 13 years old and you don't write anything down, it would be hard to play a historian and recreate that story. But Gateway has done such a remarkable job of keeping track of what they've been doing, writing it down, and then so that really makes it easier for someone like me who wants to come in and say, well, you know, what's happened over here in the last 13 years? So 13 years of writing things down has really helped me to build this presentation, helped me to be that Gateway historian. And also, these slides are not set in stone, right? I enjoy passing them back and forth with Gateway. They can tell me what I got wrong, what I got right. It becomes an exercise in learning about what has actually happened. And so just sort of as a springboard for our discussion, our panel discussion, I want to just bring your attention here to this quote up in the top right from an article called A Contextual Theory of Learning and the Learning Organization. Employees in a close working relationship, for example, teams, act as if they were a common active memory, but each with a differentiated responsibility to remember different parts of critical events and experiences. Employees remember places and episodes attached to critical events rather than all the details attached to the events they have shared, and leave it to the others to remember and interpret those details they themselves have forgotten or not registered. So, you know, for Gateway board members who are new to Gateway, for example, they weren't around in 2008, 2009, they're not really up to date on what happened in Gateway's early years. And so my aim for this presentation, which really began as a sense-making exercise for me, I'm realizing that it could be a sense-making exercise also for people who are new to Gateway, whether they're involved with Gateway directly or even just people who are interested in Gateway itself. So I'll use that quotation just as a springboard to jump into our panel discussion, if that's okay. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. And Nancy, you already introduced the panel, so I don't need to reintroduce the panel. So if it's all right, and if you're all set, Jay, I can begin asking some questions for the panel. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great to me. And I do see one question in our chat box there. Has Gateway been involved with any community health centers? And Gwen, maybe you could take that one.
Do you want to start with that one, Scott, or?
Sure, that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, the answer is yes, we have several of them, and certainly with our project with our outreach from the pharmacy, the School of Pharmacy in Kitchener has been the biggest, but we have worked with several physicians that and nurses that are working within those family health teams across the region. And the region you identified, Scott, is a region we have worked in the teams.
Okay, so I'll get started asking the panel some questions. So I've got a question for you as well, Gwen. So I'm sitting here and I'm imagining what it would have been like for you in the early years of Gateway's development. So I'm imagining that it's the year 2010 and Gateway's been around for only 2 years. And you and the other Gateway personnel are looking back at the previous 2 years and you're thinking about how best to showcase Gateway's achievements and what you've been up to. But now it's 2021 and Gateway's been around for 13 years. So I imagine it is surreal for you to look backwards at 13 years of activity. So you're now able to draw from, let's say, a wealth of experience and history of activity that didn't exist for your benefit in the past. So can you describe for me what is different now that you, and to an extent the board, now that you have this vantage point of looking back over 13 years? And so, and how is this vantage point helpful in terms of honoring where you've been and planning for the future?
Well, Scott, watching those slides just now, I cannot, it looks like a major amount of work, and like I'm exhausted now from the last 13 years. It's remarkable, and thank you. Those slides are amazing, really. And Paul and Al could jump in here too, because they've been around since the beginning of Gateway as well. But everyone needs to keep in mind that we had no Canadian model. So we went to Kentucky and we saw a model that was built on state and federal funding. And that model, it took them 14 years to get up. So we come into Ontario and we say, we're going to build this model on funding that did not come from our government. And I mean, in terms of provincial or federal. And we're going to do something never really done before. So if I was to say what was the real shift, what shifted was when we started, we focused on bricks and mortar and the build. It was like, let's build a center and they will come, as we had seen in Kentucky. And we were focused on that. And then when and having one scientific director, and then we shifted from, and I have to tell you, all those 13 research chairs and our 5 research associates are all volunteers along with our board. So we are working and all of these people are donating their time to build. And that was a big shift for us, to go to expanding our research chairs and getting away from building and, the bricks and mortars and building internally the organization. Until we're at a point now where we're being recognized as an organization that's worthy to invest in. So I don't know if Al or Paul would have a comment on that, but that was my vision and what I believe the real changes are now in 2021.
Paul or Al, do you have anything to add to that, or can I move on to another question?
I think we can carry through.
Sure. So this question is for you, Paul.
Yeah.
So you work for Community Futures Huron, and you have seen many organizations come and go. And so you know a thing or two about some of the necessary ingredients for organizations to thrive, and organizations in a rural setting in particular. So in your view, what are some of the ingredients that have been necessary for Gateway's emergence and perhaps its sustained development over time? And then added on to that, how is Gateway similar to organizations you know about or have worked with? And then how is Gateway different?
Yeah, I would like to, are you getting some feedback there, Scott?
I can hear you.
Okay, I would, yeah, I want to pick up where Gwen left off and say, this is an organization with a huge amount of passion and persistence. And passion and persistence go a long way, but they're never enough. You need more than that for a successful organization. And I look at Gateway through its evolution, and it's developed, I think, some really key important characteristics. It has, I refer to Gateway as if it was a creature, a human being, perhaps metaphysical, but there's obviously collective knowledge there, but a self-awareness of what exactly it is that Gateway does, the value proposition behind the organization and its vision. And added to that, it does, there's an excellent ability. I'm all about storytelling. I never want to read another 50-page report. I just want to hear somebody sit down and tell me a story for 10 minutes. And the Gateway gang have absolutely excelled in being able to sort of crystallize what it is that they do. But I think what really sets it apart for me, simplistically, is it's a not-for-profit board, but it's incredibly entrepreneurial. It's one of the most entrepreneurial nonprofit organizations I've ever dealt with. And that works a couple of ways. They see a gap in the marketplace, that rural health needs are not being served. So let's fill that gap. But they're also, and they say about any entrepreneur, whether it's an organization or an individual, the really great ones fail 3 or 4 times before they're successful. And yeah, did Gateway go down some rabbit holes? Absolutely. But they learn from it, they turn around, and then they refocus their vision slightly and keep moving forward. So those are the aspects from the evolution of the organization, I think, that make them stand apart from other organizations that I've dealt with.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Now I've got a question for Al. So Al, you teach as part of the capacity development program at the University of Guelph. And I'm sure that you would agree that the development of organizational capacity is entangled to a degree with the organization's ability to produce and then utilize its own knowledge. So knowledge that it's gained from experience, let's say, or knowledge that comes out of sense-making activities. So to what degree do you think this notion of sense-making is important for emerging organizations, and then in particular, let's say, rural organizations?
First of all, I think incredibly important, and it's incredibly important for rural organizations for the simple reason that rural Canada is a very diverse place. Different places have different knowledges, have different challenges. If I could speak to sort of specifically around Gateway in this, I think, both Gwen and Paul sort of dealt a little bit with the history, but the piece that's really impressed me over the years has been their openness to really examining what they're doing and their ability to read the broader environment. So you see a real shift and change in the organization in terms of the breadth of from where it started to where it is currently. And I really take that as a reflection of the board and the board's knowledge. They have actually an incredible board currently that has a real vision and is working very difficult. So I think it's incredibly important. I think that local knowledge is incredibly important. And I think in terms of Gateway, the knowledge of the board is incredibly deep. And that really has a lot of bearing. As a researcher, I really look to them for the lead on lots of projects because they know the terrain much better than I do. And so working with them has been a joy. And their ability to capitalize on local resources, and in particular the students. I've had the privilege of working with students who also, because they come from the region, bring a knowledge of that, which really adds value to the research projects that I've worked on with Gateway. And so there's a tacit or an implicit knowledge, however you want to describe it, in regions. And Gateway has really, from my perspective anyways, optimized tapping into that knowledge and utilizing that knowledge, and really in essence is a learning organization. So I'm not sure I answered your question. So that's my answer.
Yeah, you've answered. That's great, Al. I've got another question for Gwen here. So Gwen, I know that for some organizations, there's a tension between choosing one direction and then perhaps at the other extreme, trying to do everything for everyone and all at once. And so I know that Gateway at times has wondered about how to find a balance between those. So it seems to me that Gateway has over time become very accommodating in terms of the student projects that it's able to facilitate. So the Gateway that you provide has become broader in terms of interdisciplinarity, for example. And so my question is, how is it that your organization has been able to stay consistent with its original vision, but also maintain a sort of receptivity of sorts, or and a tendency to include more and more, to bring more under the Gateway umbrella? So it seems to me that this tension between one and many directions has never really been resolved at Gateway, but that may have worked in your favor in terms of helping to build the sort of network that you're trying to build. And so what would you say about that?
Well, I would agree, Scott, that the challenge has been, potentially the clinical research projects versus the healthy, sustainable community. Like health, the word health is pretty broad, right? So we can take this research in many directions. So that's opportunity more than challenge to me. The tension's always there. There are some of us on the board that have our bags packed and we're ready to develop international satellites, and we need to go to those countries and investigate them. We're pretty excited about that. But there is also the part of us that wants to stabilize, put our roots down, and make a local research center that's strong, and then branch out. But I think our strength has been that small, nimble organization. And as Al said, we're able to react to the changing environment. And the pandemic's been a prime example. We have a lot of research around COVID right now, and we were able to move on that quickly. And so if we spread ourselves too thinly, which we'd like to, there's lots of opportunity for us to expand. Then we wouldn't be able maybe to do as well the projects that we are doing right now. So yes, it will always be a tension. I don't call it tension, I call it more opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Gwen. And this question is for Paul. So Paul, you and I have spoken a few times about this idea of a common organizational memory, or an active organizational memory, let's say. We've talked about this before. I know you have an interest in this idea. So do you see this idea of a common organizational memory as having utility, and why? And what, if anything, can this utility, so this recognition of the importance of organizational memory, what can it highlight for rural organizations in particular? What can you say about that from your standpoint from working at?
Well, first of all, I recall one of your very early presentations of the slides at a Gateway meeting. And I was actually, it was a bit of an aha moment for me. Part of it being that, first of all, your model is graphic. So literally a picture, tells 1,000 words. And for many learners and engagers, I think that's important. To keep in mind. But and as far, I'll give you a platitude that, well, you as an organization, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And it is a platitude. It's a case of, by documenting it this way, it sets in stone there things that often get forgotten. And, you know, on a very, very pragmatic level, I always remember, I love to tell the story about starting my career out in community development and being at a community engagement meeting one time. And some rather obnoxious drunk in the back row of the community center said, "What the hell good are you anyway?" And so I thought, you know, what I learned from that, you have to have the answer in 15 seconds or less, or you're dead. And then, but then there's another question, which is, well, what have you done for me lately? And there's a lot of people out there like that. It's just part of human nature. What have you done for me lately? Well, Gateway knows what it's done for people lately because it's all documented. It's right down there. And you know, so I encourage that notion of always celebrating, right? Always celebrating, but never forgetting. And that's I think that's a good lesson for any rural organization. And finally, on a pragmatic level, Gateway works in a rural environment where we all struggle with limited human resources, limited volunteers. Gateway's never, ever, once ever had trouble finding board members or research chairs. And why is that? It's because it's a combination of the passion of and enthusiasm of the leadership, but also, if you look back, everybody wants to be part of a success story, right? And that success is now, it's documented there, it's understood, you know, what things were game changers. But at a very cursory view, boom, you see what kind of organization Gateway is. And yeah, it does. It actually builds enthusiasm, I think, for those volunteers that are interested in being part of the community, let alone the research chairs that made the new research, or let alone students, right? Everybody wants to be part of that success story. And that's based on a historical track record. So I think those are really pragmatic reasons why something like this can be useful to all. In fact, I would love to talk to you someday about doing one for Community Futures Huron, but that's for another day.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I've got another question for Al here. It's similar, but it's a bit different. So Al, you are familiar with evaluation and the different ways that you might approach evaluating an organization. So that I know that you have an interest in process evaluation. So not so much looking at an organization as a sum of outputs, but as a series of events, and asking, how is it that we came to be this way, or how did we get here? So actually, this idea of laying information out in a visual timeline is an idea that I actually cribbed from you. So you and I have done some similar exercises with other organizations in Oxford County. But these are on giant pieces of paper that we hang on the wall. So this is a bit different. But what can you tell us about the value of process evaluation, and why is a process evaluation useful, and what can it reveal that a summative evaluation cannot?
That's a tough question.
Oh, sorry.
I think this is somewhat related to what Paul was talking about, and sort of the documentation of understanding where you've been. So the processes in a lot of ways in flexible organizations are more important sometimes than the outcomes, because the outcomes change and shift, but the processes continue. So one of the processes that Gateway has been engaged in that's really incredible, and it's sort of mapped out that the development of social capital, or developing those. And so the development of relationships and sort of those collaborative strategies that they've utilized have really served them well. And I think that's what you want to understand. The outcomes come and go, but the processes continue through. And if you pay attention to the processes, it leads you to more greater outcomes, if you like. And I think when you sort of place those graphic illustrations, I'm thinking about the one of the students where, you know, there's just a few students and all of a sudden there's all kinds of students. And that really speaks to an inherent process that Gateway is engaged in terms of their development students, whether you want to call them research assistants or a mentorship program, or that, but you saw that across pretty much all the graphs of this intensity of activity. And that's really a function of the processes. And so you could do the individual outcomes, and they're important to people. But from an organizational point of view, I think the processes are much more important than the particular outcomes of individual programs or research projects. So I think that's the advantage. It sort of grows and builds, and Nancy's here, so I know what that means. So I will be quiet.
Do we have time for another question, Nancy, or are we about to wrap things up?
I think we need to wrap things up. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott, for providing this visual summary of Gateway through your series of interactive slides. We fondly refer to it as the Gateway Encyclopedia, and I do like your new title of Gateway Historian. Very nice. Many people have contributed to our organization over 13 years, and your efforts, Scott, are a really effective way to tie everyone together in what you refer to as a common organizational memory. It showcases Gateway's research projects and community programs, and it's really eye-opening to see the information laid out sequentially, and it reminds us of the impact that Gateway has had on the health and well-being of rural residents over a 13-year period. Today's panelists deserve so much credit for the success of our organization. Gwen, Al, and Paul, you're all key contributors to Gateway's success to date, as well as our path moving forward. Thank you for your wisdom, your dedication, and hard work on behalf of the rest of us at Gateway and our rural communities. We're proud of our beginning, encouraged by our progress, and pretty excited about our future. A huge thank you to our sponsors for the lecture series, Bruce Power, Larry Otten Contracting, Ian Murray of CIBC Wealth Management, DeJager, Town Square, IDA Pharmacy, and the town of Goderich. Without your support, this lecture series would not be possible. Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health is a not-for-profit organization with charitable status, and we greatly appreciate and welcome the support we receive. If you would like to be a donor or a sponsor, we would be pleased to talk about opportunities there. Lastly, thank you to all attendees joining us today for this digital exploration of Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health. We look forward to welcoming you to the next lecture series event on December 7th. Our speaker will be Leith Deacon. He is an associate professor at the University of Guelph and Gateway's Chair of Rural Resiliency. Leith's presentation is entitled COVID-19 and the Importance of Local Data, a Case for Small and Rural Communities in Ontario. So please feel free to pass along this information to your networks to help us expand the reach of this lecture series. Our aim is to promote the knowledge economy, reduce social isolation, and support Gateway's mission of improving the health and quality of rural residents. So take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay warm.
Thanks, Nancy.